So there's, let me give a little backup before we get to this slide. If you read the scientific articles about the origin or the sort of the basis of transgenderism, you'll see that there's a strong emphasis in that it's biological. It's something innate. There's some kind of gender identity that everybody has, and it's just that some people are born this way. They have a built-in, they're the opposite sex in their brains, like Bruce Jenner. Um, this is based on the assertions of a few psychologists. It's not based on any scientific evidence. It's not research. It's just in the 60s they began just saying, well, yeah, it's built in. It's part of who they are. And that just kind of took hold, and it's not based on anything. And so over the course of the past 30 years, they've been looking at people's brains and thinking about what about hormones in utero and all these various ways that people might have had their gender identity scrambled. And it all looks very nice when you read the paper. They say, whoa, there's tantalizingly close evidence, and it's very, very suggestive of some association here. It's spin, and if you read it carefully, there's nothing really in there that connects. There's enormous gaps. It takes a huge leap of faith to even say that there's anything connected. There's probably 10 or 20 other more likely explanations for any associations they do see. So they just selectively choose these outcomes, and pretty much all of the science investigating that is an exercise in confirmation bias and selection bias, where they're just trying to, we have an idea, this is how we think this is happening. Of course, we want this to be what we're showing. So in the 60s, after maybe 20 or 30 years of a few adults piping up and saying, "Oh, I think I'm the opposite sex," they began to think, "Wow, these kids, what about when they were kids? Maybe we can catch these kids early." And I guess after the 50s, transsexualism was played out in the media. There was a big case in Denmark, actually was an American who went to Denmark, and it was all over the mass media. They started making films, Some Like It Hot. You had all this exploration of gender, a lot of films, Myra Breckinridge, and I don't know, a whole bunch of different films began looking at gender stuff, and so as people were thinking about it, and so they brought their kids in when they would be playing around with, the boy would put on his mom's shoes, the girl would want to climb a tree or something, and they'd bring these kids into to the doctors, who would be very intrigued, like, oh, the gender identity of these kids, we've got to see if we can alternately try to prevent transsexualism, or later begin to steer them into it. So in the Netherlands, they got the idea based on the sad sob stories of older transsexuals who had surgery and what miserable childhoods they'd had as the opposite sex in their brains. They thought, what if we just block their puberty? That might be good. Buy them time to explore. Never mind that since then, I think all children who have begun a course of puberty blockers have continued with the process. They don't go off it. And so in the Netherlands, they specify they start around 11 or 12 with the blockers, and in hormones around age 15 or 18. But of course, in the United States, they start much earlier. They start the blockers around 8 or 9, because you never know. I mean, basically, if you have kids taking this and you say, we're just checking it out, you might really be a boy, might really be a girl might really be a boy. They're thinking, okay, yeah, I'm the opposite sex, and they're just getting entrained into this whole pattern. And so it's a one-way trip. You don't go off these things, and even if you do, what happens? The boy is 3 inches shorter, his voice hasn't broken, the girl hasn't developed, she hasn't had menstruation. All of her peers have. They don't change back. They don't say, okay, well, actually, I'm really this one. I want to mention, I don't think I put this in the slides, that we're talking about 2 different streams of children. There's the smaller children who are just playing around with clothes, or the girl wants to climb a tree, the boy wants to play with dolls, and given the public consciousness through the media of transgender, instead of just saying, wow, okay, you're just playing around, or it's not a big deal, or maybe you're gay, they rush them to the gender clinics, of which there are, I think, more than 50 in the United States now. Pediatric gender clinics I'm talking about, funded by multimillionaires who may themselves be transgender or are transgender. And so there's the stream of the children and the blockers, where from the age of about 2, uh, they're brought in, and some are encouraged to do a social transition. In San Francisco, that's the big popular thing. It's a one-way trip. If a boy starts wearing dresses at age 3 and says you're a girl and you play with the girls now, he doesn't go back to start, wait a minute, I'm a boy. I mean, normally they would, but they're given these blockers from about 8 or 9, and that just cements it. Then they're on a trip. So that's the one stream, and the other stream is rapid onset gender dysphoria, or it's a mass craze going on in the world right now, where teenagers and young adults, predominantly girls, young women, are just suddenly coming, as she described, just suddenly announcing, I think I'm trans. And so it's let's see if I got there. Oh, back on the blockers. It's right. They just suddenly pipe up with this, and everybody is expected to go along with it. And because nobody wants to be a bigot, nobody wants to do the wrong thing accidentally, and nobody wants to misgender anybody. I mean, everybody's thinking about these things now, and these are just made-up constructs. And the gender identity it's like it's the new eating disorder. It's the new goth, or it's maybe a little more serious than that, because medical interventions are involved. But that's where it starts out. It's on the level of a social kind of thing, where your friends are one of your friends is, I'm trans, I think, I'm non-binary, I saw a TV show. Over and over you hear stories where they're saying, yeah, I saw this show and it really clicked with me that maybe I'm trans. And what's really happening is the young girls have a kind of internalized misogyny or internalized homophobia, or they're internalized sort of like safe. They want safety. It's they've traumatized. Men have been hitting on them or worse, and they're just want refuge, and maybe I'll be a boy. So there's a variety of reasons that girls get into it. The young boys might have the beginnings of autogynephilia, which is a paraphilia that is sort of encouraged in society through pornography and through just sexualization of everything, of cross-dressing is in the public, in the media. So the boys have the beginnings of this kind of a fetish, in a way, and it progresses, and it pretty soon they internalize it that, wow, maybe I have a feminine gender identity, maybe I'm a girl inside, and it steamrolls from there, and in the old days, it might have just been sort of self-limiting, but now you can act on it before you're mature. So that's the two streams: the children who their parents kind of put them in there, and the old clinicians in the 60s used to check out the psychopathology of the parents, and often found that they would discern borderline symptoms in these parents. You'd look at why are the parents bringing these kids in here? But not anymore. Now it's this wonderful, wonderful thing. So let me see what we have any slides. I think I'm just going to go extemporaneously. So with the blockers, it stops them from growing. It stops them from maturing physically, and it also, because puberty is more than just your genitals changing. It's your mind. It's a socialization. You have your peers, and if you're as I say, if you think you're the opposite sex and you're being on that train already for a few years, it's really very difficult to get off. And most don't. I think none do. And those that do disappear. Do they commit suicide? Nobody knows. That's never checked. That's the other thing about trans medicine, is if they ever look with their populations of people they've put through the process, a few years later, check on them. If they ever find, most of them, they usually miss about 30%, 30, 40, 50%. Lost to follow-up, no big deal. I mean, with HIV, if you had 30 to 40% lost to follow-up, it would be an emergency. It's considered, they've moved on with their lives or something. They don't want to participate in our study anymore. They're fine. When you have that many lost to follow-up and that many suicides that they're reporting, you have to wonder, is there a connection? We don't know. So many of these young people, and really there's been thousands. We saw that chart from the UK with a couple thousand kids. Well, imagine that in every English-speaking country, and mostly it's English-speaking countries, I think. The United States is just extrapolate from that British figure. It's many thousands, 50 gender clinics, come on. So they are now able to get their surgeries at 15 in Oregon, and with the parents' consent, they're getting mastectomies at 13 years old in Los Angeles. There's a doctor called Dr. Joanna Olson Kennedy, who has a study. It's funded by the NIH, and she refers young girls to the surgeons as young as age 13 for radical mastectomy. And the world cheers. It's considered cutting edge and wonderful. And she's very proud of it. You can see her on her videos. It's really pretty disturbing. And the boys can have their genital surgeries from about 16, and there's some hint that it might even be 15. The doctors want to get them while they're still in high school. There's a paper even out where they've surveyed the doctors to see what they think. How young is too young is the title of the paper. They want to get the boys while they're still in school because they'll probably still be living at home. The parents can help with the extensive aftercare that takes months, and it's extremely intensive, and lots can go wrong. Because when they're 18, they want to go out and party, they're at college or something, and more things go wrong. So can you imagine the doctors are thinking, how can we get to them before they're 18 and have these genital surgeries? So it's really, the barn doors are wide open. I mean, really, they're just going for broke. And society is sort of indoctrinated to now think this is human rights. And I don't want to say the wrong thing here. I mean, I can hardly imagine what doctors must be thinking. I mean, just general practitioners around the country who refer their patients to the gender clinics. I mean, these are people who are trained to be critical and to have differential diagnoses. I mean, you can't read everything. They can't keep up with the latest of this in the papers. Do they just say, well, I mean, I'm surprised to hear you have that this is true, that people can have an innate gender identity and actually be the opposite sex, and that it's fine to put them through these surgical changes. But I'll go along with it because I don't have time to read all the science or look at it critically. But as I say, if you look at it critically, very critically, you can see right through the spin and just see they're talking about A, D, and B and C are missing. But somehow A is now connected to D. So anyway, I think you get the idea from what I'm saying. The science is complete junk. And people go along with it just because they don't know how to assess bias in a study and what's the value of this, evidentiary value of this, and how likely is it to be just complete crap? Well, it's really likely. And the sort of tendency in people to want to do the right thing, whether they're liberal or conservative, they want to do the right thing. They can't keep up with everything. It's pretty surprising, but we've had a lot of societal changes. So, okay, everybody's transgender. You can be transgender, non-binary, whatever. This is all a bunch of nonsense, and we have to stop it. I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of children now are going through this.